It also weakens the vigilance of relevant parties towards the international financial strategy hidden behind the financial crisis, which began with Soros selling short the Thai currency. From this perspective, it is the openness and complexity of the system, as well as the enormous imagination space of currency value, that objectively determines finance the arrival of civilization's fate. At the same time, the stability brought about by complexity and the calm waves brought by Chinese-style closing positions make Chinese people who are accustomed to gradual and passive correction subjectively unclear and unprepared for this new fate. However, in the middle of the management's balance of the asymmetry that arises in reality, in the spontaneous real practice of the private sector in addition to the stock market, there are also the emergence of private finance such as Guanqi and Zhejiang Fund, which has accelerated the process of financial opening up, gradually separated the real economy from the virtual economy, and formed financial awareness and rules. It can be seen that China is unconsciously entering the door of financial civilization, and the muddled state dragged by reality is expected to continue for a long time, due to a lack of understanding and reflection on the new civilization. The original regulatory methods have still been followed. However, as regulation has been repeatedly falsified, traditional theories and empirical methods have been overturned one by one, and all sectors of society will gradually recognize the situation and understand financial civilization. Why are we slow and fast in dealing with the issues of capital and finance? The subprime mortgage crisis finally made Bernanke uneasy. First, he cut the bank rate by basis points, and then the quasi-interest rate has been reduced to 2%. The practical action of saving the market first completely overturned its previously held belief that inflation is the primary goal of monetary policy, in sharp contrast to the rapidity of the rescue action. The U.S. Federal Reserve turned a blind eye to the foam and reacted slowly to the foam in the slow accumulation process of the housing market. Behind this policy's division reflects human alienation. Before taking over the role of the Federal Reserve, Bernanke was a non-foam theorist and also published an academic paper asserting that monetary policy is essentially powerless to foam. While his behavior in the subprime mortgage crisis was undoubtedly self-defeating, also betraying his beliefs is his predecessor Greenspan, who was a disciple of economic liberalism in his college years. But once he took the baton of the Federal Reserve, he immediately changed his face and repeatedly intervened in the operation of the invisible hand with the visible hand of policy. 2 generations of Federal Reserve leaders have a dual personality in their bodies. Looking at the current Chinese economy, there is also a similar phenomenon of slow and rapid growth. On the one hand, in terms of capital, the regulatory response in finance and state-owned enterprises is swift and hasty. Huajin Company, less than 4 years after its establishment, has injected $1 billion into the 4 major state-owned banks. As for the latter trillion yuan bad debts, they have been quietly wiped out by the central bank and the Ministry of Finance. China Investment Corporation (CIC), which had a lot of activity, started preparing in March and had already smoothly released its investment within 6 months. It even eagerly completed its investment in Blackstone in May as a foreign exchange investment company. Unfortunately, this investment not only failed to make a profit, but also paid tuition fees. It is not surprising that similar situations are also common in areas such as state-owned enterprise reform. On the other hand, there is a slow response in market construction and scientific coordination. The capital market has been open for years and is still a lame duck. The defect of the listing mechanism only of the market value, too few trading varieties, no short selling mechanism, etc., make the capital market have to endure the pain of no intermediate transition space. After years of procrastination on the Next board, small and medium-sized enterprises that are short of money have waited until the flowers withered. As for antitrust, there are many slogans and few actions. The anti-monopoly W was only introduced after years of and is accustomed to using the laws of industrial civilization and information civilization to explain, study and judge financial problems. The development of the securities market according to geometric series conforms to the laws of financial civilization, but meets the logic of industrial civilization, regulation and intervention according to the development of arithmetic progression. The so-called P/E ratio, securitization rate and valuation model in the inherent knowledge system have been repeatedly denied by the market, but they are still regarded as the supreme. Being conservative towards traditional knowledge and unable to understand the arrival of a new civilization may result in schizophrenia. Integrating and responding to the four civilizations in a timely manner will lead to a winner-take-all in the market. Ownership superstition and state motivation. In the first half of GDP grew by %. Foreign trade showed a year-on-year decline. Inflation was high, and small and medium-sized enterprises were struggling sad. Bankruptcy has become a trend. Regarding this situation, the relevant parties are both very vigilant and very anxious. Based on continuous meetings and discussions, they have decided to change the macro tuning from dual prevention to one protection and one control, and have made sufficient articles on protection. In terms of policy rescue itself, it is understandable, but if analyzed from the perspective of macro adjustment history, today's scene is precisely the period of macro adjustment back then, and the current situation proves the remarkable achievements of macro adjustment. The reason why we dare not recognize the macro adjustment results is that the protection and pressure distribution of macro adjustment policies is uneven, which is basically characterized by the protection of state-owned enterprises and the laissez-faire of private enterprises. Starting from the tight monetary and land supply in this end of regulation, the GEM has been delayed. Private enterprises have no access to financing, and state-owned enterprises and central enterprises can queue up to go public. The vast number of low-end enterprises in the industrial upgrading have completely lost their protection, and industrial enterprises take the opportunity to regain lost land and complete industry monopolies and market division, such as telecommunications. This result naturally cannot be accepted calmly by private enterprises. Therefore, the political foundation that can ensure the transformation of economic growth mode is fairness and justice. And based on this, policies can be revised the intention and effectiveness of the measures. Otherwise, the political show of Yigong Heilong will greatly undermine the government's credibility and make the cost of trial and error increasing. High. A prerequisite for establishing a political foundation based on fairness and justice is the establishment of a new concept of the country and a new concept of the people. That is, the understanding of the state transcends the violent machine in the stage of class conflict. But is independent of social entities, represents the common interests of all members of society, and takes the establishment of rules and regulations, maintenance of rules, and provision of public services as the main national motivation. Only when the national motivation is pure and selfless can the political principle of fairness and justice not be excluded. The new concept of the people is to restore the people from abstract concepts and exploitable slogans to specific individuals and interest groups. Only through the evolution of negation and negation can the people-oriented people find a realistic career, and the specific interests of people be respected, rather than being a broad concept. The difficulty of transforming this concept lies in encountering the resistance of traditional ideology and the covert boycott of vested interest groups. Another prerequisite is the upgrade of the governance concept, that is, the upgrade of the version of making decisions for the people, which is undertaken by everyone, upgrading from limited liability to a limited and bounded management model that leads social rules and maintains their fair execution. Previously, the direct participation of the state in the operation of the economy inevitably led to self-interest, resulting in impure motives for the state. However, when the state is above economic interests and only serves as the creator and maintainer of the system, the transformation of its role creates a natural demand for the principles of fairness and justice. The controversial labor contract law, to some extent, is a manifestation of the shift in national motivation from favoring enterprises to providing universal coverage for the interests of workers. It is a transition from a focus on efficiency first to a balance between fairness. Despite its poor timing, it is still a landmark milestone, because the more a few people resist, the more they can reflect that it actually represents the interests of the majority and touches the pain points of interest groups. At present, it is the Ministry of Power that undermines the principles of fairness and justice, distorts the state's motives seriously, and causes even greater public discontent. The phenomenon of door-oriented, departmental interest-oriented, and interest group-oriented. Many authorities use the name of the state to harm the people and enrich the private sector, and practice monopoly under the guise of maintaining fairness and justice. This distorts the essence and core of the national political system, which means that the state represents the interests of the entire society and the nation, and implements its representation through various state machines. However, in reality, various state machines become representatives of the state and fulfill the interests of their own departments in the process of representation. This deviation is the source of social contradictions at this stage. The real reason for the large-scale mass incident in Wengan County, Guizhou, is that the government has repeatedly violated the interests of the masses in mineral resources development, resettlement, building demolition and other work, and in the process of handling conflicts, disputes and mass incidents. Some cadres have a rough style, simple working methods and random use of police force. Although the stock market was in a mess in the first half of the year, there were still over billion yuan in stamp duty receipts, and local state-owned asset management commissions are still preparing to queue up deliberation, state-owned but punishment is not applicable to officials, which is not detrimental to the increasing trend of administrative monopoly. Objectively speaking, behind this phenomenon of slow and swift dual heaven, there is a change in the weather of reform, which means reform we have shifted from the field of ideology to a strategic layout at the level of interests. During the pro-reform period, the attention of various sectors of society was focused on the basic direction of society, such as whether the reform should be carried out, whether it was capitalist or socialist, etc. This also sparked two major reform debates in the early S and early S. Deng Xiaoping cleverly bypassed these ideological disputes and successfully opened up an era of development through his speeches on three treatises and Southern Expedition. In the post-reform period, reforms were constantly hijacked and internalized by interest groups, and people with rice in their hands began to let their buttocks determine their minds, setting various obstacles at the level of interests. As for the current regulation of capital finance and the rapid efforts of state-owned enterprises and state-owned enterprises, but the slow response to market construction and scientific coordination, this seemingly split phenomenon is the result of the distribution of interests. Take China Investment Corporation as an example. CIC has gathered a group of high-level officials from the Ministry of Finance, Huajin Corporation, the China Banking Regulatory Commission, and the National Development and Reform Commission. It is not difficult to infer from the identities of influential senior officials at the ministerial and deputy levels that CIC has actually concentrated the ideas and interests of a generation. The chairman was originally a reformist expert in the market economy known as one of the three swordsmen of economic system reform. But later, as the official ladder rose, he became obsessed with the effectiveness of state-owned and administrative monopolies. If it is said that this dual personality of front and back fracture is caused by the buttocks determining the brain, it is probably not too much. The duality of this personality is more evident in another reformist swordsman, the general manager of CIC. As one of the earliest sea turtles to land in China, he returned home from Wall Street in the S with the belly full of Western economics Inc. Similar remarks such as "what we want is a clean market and let the market manage the market" clearly indicates his market-oriented background. Due to his successful initiation of the establishment of the Chinese securities market, he also rose to prominence in his career. Afterwards, he also showed a similar fascination with the hands of the government. In terms of this issue, the leaders in relevant fields between